Hello everyone, myself Monica, a lecturer of Oxford Degree College. Today in this session, I'll be discussing with the topic methods of data collection. In this we'll be discussing about what are the types of data that can be primary data, secondary data. Under primary data, what are the sources we have? Under secondary data, what are the sources we have? So before that, we'll try to understand what is the meaning of a data. A data is a collection of facts, figures, statistics collected together for the purpose of analysis and to find the solution to the research problem. The examples of data would be, say, the age group of the respondents, the type of loan provided by the bank to its customers, and the income level of the respondents. So those are the examples of data. So once we are clear with the meaning of data, will come for the classification of the data, that is types of data. In the types of data, we have two types, that is primary data and secondary data. Primary data are those data where the researcher obtains for the first time from the original source, that is called as primary data. Secondary data is a data where a researcher obtains the data from already available source, that can be published or unpublished source. So that is called as secondary data. So next, what are the methods of collecting the primary data? When I say primary data, what are the sources we have? What are the methods? What are the techniques we have? So in this, the first one is observation method. So observation method, it is also one of the methods of primary data. So in observation, what happens is that a researcher just makes a casual observation from the respondents. Most of such observations are casual and just seeing. Say for example, if a researcher wants to know the brand of the watch owned by the respondent, instead of asking what is the brand of your watch, simply he can just make an observation and analyze what is the brand of watch that he is wearing. So that is observation method. And coming to interview method is just a face-to-face interaction between a researcher and the respondent. So in this interview method, we do have different types of interviews. That could be personal interview, telephone interview, structured interview, unstructured interview, focused interview, clinical interview, depth interview. And next, the third method of collection of primary data is collection of data through questionnaire. So questionnaire, where this method of collection of data would be applied for big inquiries, where most of such collection of data, this method of collection of data is very much popular for big inquiries. And next, collection of data through the schedules. In schedules, what happens is that instead of a respondent responding to a researcher, he appoints a person known as enumerators. So now let us understand in detail what is this observation method, what is interview method, what are the collection of data through the questionnaire, collection of data through the schedules. So the first one is observation method. So as I told you earlier, that observation means reviewing or seeing. Most of such observations are casual in nature. There is no specific purpose. In research, it is a systematic viewing of a specific phenomenon for a particular study. So the example here I have quoted, in a study relating to a consumer behavior, the researcher, instead of asking the brand of the watch used by the respondent, the researcher just observes his wrist and he'll analyze what is the brand of the watch that the respondent is wearing. Next one is interview method. So in this interview method, what happens is that it is a face-to-face conversation or an interaction between a respondent and a researcher, where a researcher poses the questions and respondent answer for that question. So the third one is collection of data through the questionnaire. So this is one of the most popular method of data collection under primary data. That is, these questionnaires are adopted where the investigations are very quite larger, and questionnaire is a pre-formulated written or printed set of questions to which the respondents record their answers, usually within closely defined alternatives. So when I talk about questionnaires, nowadays we use most of the researcher, we use Google Forms as one of the popular method of collecting of primary data. So, to precise it and to say that a questionnaire is a pre-formulated written set of questions which is given to the respondent for his response, where the respondent fill this questionnaire and submit to the researcher, and then researcher makes the analysis. So the essentials of this good questionnaires would be: the questionnaire should be very simple, it should be very short, and it should continue some logical sequence in that. So these are the essentials of a good questionnaire. And collecting data through a questionnaire, it is one of the cheapest way to collect the data, to get the data, and it is being adopted by private individuals, private in organizations, public organization, research workers, and even by governments. So the next method of data collection would be like collection of data through the schedules. So what happens in this schedules is that where the data collection is very similar to the collection of data through the questionnaire, with little difference. That is, questionnaire is filled by the enumerators who are specially appointed for the purpose. So what happens in this method of data collection is that where the respondent will not respond to the questionnaire given by the researcher. Instead of that, these questionnaire will be filled by a person named as enumerator, who has been specially appointed by this respondent to fill the questionnaire. So this is also one of the primary method of collecting the data. And next, coming to the second classification of the data, that is secondary data. Secondary data are those data which is already collected by the researcher from an available resources, from a published source or unpublished source. So in this published source, the first type we have reports and official publications. Say if we are making any research on something on financial inclusion, some kind of project reports on finance topics, so we can get access to reports such as given by International Monetary Fund, International Financial Corporation, that is IFC, and United Nations Organization. And when you are making something survey about agricultural crop seasoning, you can get report from season and crop report, statistical abstract, and also you can refer the publication of Reserve Bank of India when your studies are related to the monetary policy of our country. So the next classifications would be like semi-official publications by municipal corporations and district boards. So you can refer if you are referring some kinds of publications by some bodies, professional bodies like Indian Chambers, Commerce Associations, Indian Chambers of Institute of Chartered Accountants, financial reports, financial and economic journals. So these journals can be issued at regularly or like yearly, monthly, weekly, etc. So when you are collecting the sources from these sources, that is called as secondary data collection. So now the question would have been arised in your minds, if I want to make a research, whether I need to go for primary methods of data collection or secondary data collection. So my opinion is that, see, what research demand is more important than choosing between a primary data and a secondary data. What your research demands, that becomes more important. It's not that you need to just collect primary data, it is not that you need to collect only secondary data. What does your research demands, that becomes more important. So that is what I have given you. The difference between primary and secondary data is a matter of relativity. Data which are primary in hands of one becomes secondary in the hands of another. If an individual or an institution collect the data for their research work, it then becomes primary. If anyone else uses the same data, it is called as secondary. So that is what the slide says. It's not primary data, secondary data. What your research demands, that becomes more important in conducting a research. So by this I have finished with what are the methods of data collection, what are the types of data collection, that is primary and secondary. In primary data collection, we have discussed with observation method, interview method, collection of data through questionnaire, and collection of data through schedules. And in secondary source of data collection, we have discussed the published source and unpublished source. Thank you.